Hey Hugh, it's Ryan. Really excited about this next episode with your wife, Penny. I think it's going to be great. But just before we do it, I had an idea of potentially a new jingle or a new intro song that we could do for the show. And I don't know, it might not be right, but I just thought before we actually, use it on the show, just run it by you quickly and see what you think. So here we go. Hello there, hello you, this is us, Ryan and Hugh. If you need a fix, listen to us, we're the Imperfects. So, I don't know, it's a work in progress. So, yeah, have a think, and maybe you can start the show, but if you think it's weird, then we definitely won't use it. Okay, see you soon. Bye, it's Ryan Shelton.
To call back, press 22.
We're all imperfect, and on this podcast, I'll be chatting with a variety of interesting people who are willing to make themselves vulnerable by sharing their own struggles and imperfections.
Then we'll discuss the invaluable takeaways we can all apply to our own imperfect lives.
I'm Hugh Van Kylenberg from the Resilience Project.
And I'm Ryan Shelton from my mum, and this is The Imperfects.
Okay, welcome back everyone to our cupboard. Back in the cupboard.
Our cupboard?
Well,
Oh, no, your cupboard.
my cupboard, sorry, my cupboard.
Yeah.
No hot cross buns today. Apologies for that.
That's okay. That's all right. It's a new day, and you were just telling me actually about the webinar that you did. You did a webinar because we talked about last episode about the fact that you're about to. This is yesterday we recorded it.
Yeah. And
then you went off yesterday afternoon and did a webinar.
Yeah. You've got to be this changing world. You've got to be agile and flexible, and so our talks. A lot of people are cancelling them, but then we had one group say we'll do it as a webinar. Yeah. Which is one of the strangest experiences I've ever had in my entire life. And I'm pretty sure the participants would tell you it was not very good.
Well, how do you know that?
Well, I don't know because I didn't see them. I couldn't hear them.
You couldn't hear them laughing?
Well, yeah, that was the...
Because your talk is very funny.
Thank you.
There's a lot of jokes, but you couldn't hear...
So I thought I might as well just do it as I usually do it, and then we'll get feedback. And so I'd do a joke bit that usually gets a big laughter, and I'd do it, and I'd just complete silence. It was like telling a joke to a wall, and then instead of then just I'd do it, and then I'd go, okay, so I guess you guys are laughing, not sure, but I'll just wait for you guys to laugh a bit. And anyway, and then I'll move on to the next. It was horrendous.
It's kind of like our experience doing this podcast. We'll make jokes with no knowledge of whether or not anyone's laughing. Probably not. They're probably just saying, just get to the juicy stuff. Tell me how to live already.
I do actually have a very good friend called James who listens to our podcast, and he messages me to let me know when he's listening to the episode. He'll send me a message going, just laughing at this bit now. So he actually tells me when he's laughing.
Amazing.
Yeah, I get this whole series of messages about this bit's really funny. I'm laughing at this bit right now.
But he only highlights the positives.
Yeah, I don't get that. Yeah, I don't get. I'm finding this bit boring.
Yeah, 2 minutes 42. Shit. Rethink this bit next time. In fact, why did you leave it in the edit? That's my question.
No, he's a lovely man. He only gives us positives. So,
love James.
James is a very good man.
So this episode, another little bonus episode in wake of this crazy, weird, strange time that we're in, all trying to figure out how to cope. But this particular one is an interview with your wife, Penny. Now, this is something that obviously you recorded this. I mean, you recorded a version of this ages ago.
Yeah.
And this is so you explain it.
Well, people are probably thinking, oh, okay, we're in lockdown, so that's your only option just to interview your wife, which is sort of true, but it's also it's actually worked out reasonably well in that when we first started this, we booked in Missy Higgins as our first interview. Yeah. And I remember saying, actually, this makes me a bit nervous. I've never done an interview in my entire life. I don't want my first interview to be with Missy Higgins because I'll get nervous and it won't go too well. And so I said to Penny, can I interview you? We'll record it as if it's actually an episode of the podcast. Ryan can listen to it and then we'll actually have a practice run.
Yeah.
And she said, yep, definitely. And so Penny went into the studio and I actually interviewed her and sent it to you to listen to so you could practice working out what questions you'd ask.
I could practice listening.
You could, which you're really good at.
No, I'd never listened to anything before, so it was really helpful. Just wondering what these big bits of flesh on the side of my head are. I was like, what are these for? And then you like have a listen to this. I was like, oh, yep, got it.
And so we did the interview, and you listened to it, and you said that was unbelievable. Like we should have that as one of our episodes.
Yep.
And I listened to it again and thought, yeah, you're right. This is actually very beneficial because Penny has struggled for a long time with anxiety disorder, more specifically a bit of a silent one, and that people never talk about it, which is OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. So,
which is, I mean, I was probably part of the majority of people before I listened to that version with Penny, that interview with Penny. I just assumed OCD was like turning light switches on and off 20 times, or having to wash your hands a lot of the time, which is very important at the moment, obviously.
Yeah.
But I didn't really know what OCD was. And then listening to her talk about it and her experience with it, completely eye-opening.
Yeah, and it's now the reason it couldn't be more relevant in today's challenges is that so Penny and I have been together for 5 or 6 years now, but very recently we went to see her psychologist together. So her psychologist could talk me through exactly what her OCD entails, because Penny's found it really hard to communicate to me what it involves. And one of the things, which is an incredible experience, by the way, going to the psychologist with Penny, an unbelievable experience. And if your partner goes to see a psychologist, you should ask if you go along and have a session, because it's incredible for the relationship. But one of the things that the psychologist said to me, this is before coronavirus, obviously, but she said to me, every generation has had something which creates OCD. Now, by the way, OCD is a lot more common than I realised. One of the chapters in my book is the title of the chapter is Penny, and it's all about her and her OCD. And I've had 3 of my really, really close friends message me or contact me and say, I've actually had OCD. And one of them said, I've had no idea what it was. I've read the chapter. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. 2 others said, yeah, I've had it and I don't know. It's awful. One of them said to me, one of them's notoriously late, and he said to me, that's why I'm late all the time. I can't leave the house if I haven't approached the door and landed on my right foot as I touch the door handle and I'm breathing out. Sorry, and I've counted to 6 as I do it. I can't leave the house. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, I can't. He said, it can take me 20 minutes to leave the house sometimes.
Wow.
And then one of Penny's friends got in touch with her, who she's known really well, and said, I'm struggling with this OCD. Thanks for sharing your story. So first of all, it's really common. So, but then when we saw the psychologist together, Penny's psychologist said to me, or said to both of us, every generation has had something that has created huge amounts of OCD anxiety. OCD is not, well, Penny will talk about this later, but in the 1920s, it was syphilis. There was a lot of education around syphilis and how to avoid it. So people became obsessive compulsive around, cleanliness and making sure, and there was this huge irrational obsessive fear of syphilis. And then I think it was in the, I could be wrong here, but in the 60s and 70s, it was around asbestos when that came out and people became obsessive around that. Then the 80s and 90s, it was AIDS. Early 2000s, terrorism. Irrational fear that something would happen to you that caused you to do really strange things that Penny will go into later on.
Yeah, like based on an actual truth that.
Yeah,
there is a chance that it can happen.
Yeah, totally.
Even if it's a very, very low chance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Penny's psychologist said to me, and recently it's been global warming, and then over the summer period with the fires, I was thinking, well, this is going to be quite a significant event which might affect, young kids growing up in country. Australia will, regional parts of Australia might develop this, irrational fear around fire. And I was thinking that could be the next one, because Penny's psych said to me, who knows what'll be next? And now this has happened. Wow. Coronavirus has happened, which is all about washing your hands, because it's quite often about cleanliness leading to disease. So Penny's psychologist said that who knows what's going to be next? Coronavirus hits us, and all of a sudden we've got young people all over the world who are thinking, I've got to wash my hands so I don't get coronavirus. My parents could, and this is what's going to lead to the most, no one talks about it because you feel really weird, like you're really strange. So the point of this podcast is to chat to Penny about her OCD, what it's because it's changed over the years for her. There's been different things she's obsessive about. And I only found them out 4 or 5 years into our relationship, what they are. And they make so much sense of the way that she behaves now. So the point of this interview with Penny is to shed a little bit of light on OCD, because I think there are so many more people out there who experience this than we know. I think a lot of us would probably know people who experience OCD or suffer from it, I should say. But then also hopefully to give some strategies to help with that, because I think we're going to see OCD like we've never seen before.
Wow. Well, it's very kind of Penny to tell the story, even though it's in your book, of course, but to come on, I mean, it's a pretty great. We're very fortunate that she's doing it. So really, really good get that guest.
Yeah.
how you secured that one, but it's great. So I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Yeah, and I am very proud of it. I did actually say to her, look, we can just actually play the interview we did when we were practicing way back last year. And she said, no, I want to be even more honest. I want to be more vulnerable. I didn't tell the whole story. I told a very safe version of my experience, but I want to actually talk about what it's really like, because I need people to understand what it's about. Her big gripe is that we use the abbreviation OCD in a really unfair way.
Like flippantly.
Yeah, like we say, oh, my partner's so OCD about the bathroom, or I'm so OCD about, whatever it is.
Washing my car.
Yeah, washing my car. So, and Penny says that is so unfair for people like me who have had their lives, made very difficult by this condition, which, the point of this episode really is to give people, I suppose, shed some light on OCD, but then also to give people strategies so they can move past what can be a very, very difficult experience.
Well, I'll get out of your wardrobe and go and get your wife, who's currently holding your daughter. And do I then take Elsie?
I guess so. I think you're now in charge of Elsie.
Wow, this is dangerous.
It'll just be an hour. That's all.
An hour? Yeah, cool. All good. Looking forward to it.
We're all right. Can I be a fascination? Cause you hold the feeling in the room. But you want the beat, I need the tune. Holding the pieces, they're just falling. Whatever happened to me and you?
Hi, Penny.
How did you go with your intro?
I think it was really good.
What did you talk about?
You. Yeah, pretty much you.
Can you maybe close that? That's going to annoy me.
No, just a cover here.
Oh, yeah.
That's probably pretty OCD.
Oh, dear.
This whole situation is actually quite
Yeah, I thought
stressful.
It might be. Yeah. So the irony. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Welcome to your walk-in robe. The fact we're doing it in here is rather ironic, because I think this is quite triggering for you, this space, because not your part of the your half of the walk-in robe is nice and well ordered. But when we're in here together, usually it's not a happy conversation because you're so frustrated with me for having clothes everywhere in not any particular order.
I'm amazed that you've actually been able to spread your shit throughout the whole space. Like even my cupboard space has got your stuff in it.
Well, sometimes anyway, this is not the time to have this discussion, but it is a very good introduction as to why we are here. So we about probably it's hard to know how to start this. I guess we've been together for
5 years.
5 years, and about probably a few weeks into our relationship, I had this kind of feeling that I remember thinking, I don't think she's totally into me, nowhere near as much as I'm into her. And I learned very quickly that wasn't true. And a few months later, you told me that you experienced mental ill health, and in particular had an anxiety disorder. What are you laughing at?
I can just see Josh out the window walking back and forth with Elsie on his chest. It's so funny. Sorry.
That's okay. So Josh has now taken the role of he's not on the sound. So if the sound doesn't sound good for this one because he's not doing it, he's walking our 8-week-old baby up and down the street. And
Sorry,
Penny
yes.
can see. That's okay. So Penny, you divulged to me that you were struggling with for a lot of your life. You'd had an anxiety disorder.
Yeah.
And I have said this in the intro, but having written about that in my book, quite a few people got in touch with me, or a lot of people got in touch with me, a lot of people got in touch with you to say, yep, I've also experienced OCD anxiety. And we don't talk too much about OCD anxiety. It's like this silent mental illness. I think it's because people feel really embarrassed to talk about what happens to them. I've never heard anyone talk about it really. And so I thought for this podcast it'd be nice to hear from you. Feel free to talk about it as much as you go into as much depth as you want to, but without any pressure. But I suppose I'd love to just, first of all, when did you first realise that something was feeling a bit different for you, or you felt a bit different?
Oh gosh, that's a hard question. I think actually I had this, I think when I was about 9 or 10 maybe, I tried to talk about it with a friend, because ever since I was looking back, ever since I was probably 6 or 7, I've had like OCD tendencies. But at the time I obviously didn't know what they were, and they just seemed, I thought everyone was the same, I guess. But I remember I had this memory this morning actually of talking about it with a friend and being like, trying to talk about the worries that I had just to see if she had the same sort of ones. And it was then that I realised that I was not it wasn't normal, I think, because she was like, oh, I'm so worried about, she's like, yeah, I'm so worried about homework, or I'm so worried about this and that, things that were kind of trivial in a way, just the sort of normal worries of a young girl. And I think after that I sort of clammed up a bit and I realised, oh no, this isn't quite like my thoughts.
Do you remember what your worries were then?
I think at that time I was very much worried that I had HIV, that I had AIDS.
And how old were you?
Like 9, 10.
Right, okay.
So I think I realised something wasn't quite right then. But, I mean, I was so lucky that I was able to talk about it all with my mum and dad. And I'd always try to seek reassurance from my mum about certain worries that I had. But it just, like you said, and this was in the 90s, so it was just never talked about. So I think even having parents who worked in the health sector, like my dad's a doctor, mum's a physio, and they were, both sort of very up to date on mental health issues, I guess, at the time, but it still just wasn't obvious to anyone because it wasn't talked about. So
I want to hear more about what the obsession and what the compulsion is and what all that means. So could you maybe give a definition of what obsessive compulsive disorder is, and then talk about what that actually looked like for you with a fear that you had AIDS, which was so obviously irrational.
Yeah.
But if you could explain what it is, and then
I can definitely try. So OCD, there are lots of different kinds of OCD, and there's like the OCD family as well, which would like encompass like body dysmorphia and that kind of thing. So it's really broad, but obsessive compulsive disorder is all about intrusive or unwanted thoughts, which everyone has. Like, I don't think it's just people with OCD who have those thoughts, but when you have OCD, it's like you can't shake those thoughts. And they're
I don't know if this is the right word, but they're outrageous thoughts, aren't they?
They can be, and they can be really sort of taboo topics as well. So you can have different kind of obsessions. So for a lot of people, it is cleanliness, and it is picking up germs, and so then, if that's the case, that's your obsession, maybe you're going to get a disease. So then the compulsion would be to wash your hands. I mean, That's just your classic example. I think that's what like all movies and TV shows have decided to portray OCD as, because it's kind of, it's awful, but it's kind of palatable, I think. Like it's I don't know, it's not too confronting, I guess. So that's just, that's kind of what everyone thinks of, I think, when you think of OCD. But then there's another kind of OCD which is called, well, it's got a lot of different names. Some people call it pure O, which just mean it's more about the obsessions than the compulsions. So that could be around certain topics like harming people. So it could be being really worried that you're going to harm somebody else or harm yourself, or say harm your child, which is just an awful, awful thought to have. And again, it's thoughts that come into everyone's minds, but it's when they just stick and you can't shake them.
Okay, so yesterday I was walking Elsie around this around near the pool, and I had this thought in my head of if I dropped her in the pool right now, she's wrapped up in a swaddle, she would drown, and I had this like awful 2-second vision of it. Yeah. But then it was gone, and I didn't think about it again. Yeah, I guess everyone has those awful thoughts that may pop into their head, but then they just go. But people with OCD probably can't let that go. Yeah, and they're such normal thoughts to have, because you have to have those sort of thoughts to consider certain options and certain like consequences of your actions. And so they're very normal thoughts. But I think if you've got OCD, it's like that will pop into your head, and then that will kind of distress you so much. You'll start to think, I'm going to do this. Like if I'm standing here, I'm going to drop her in. And then what does that mean? That means I want to harm her. Like I'm going to make that decision to do that. That must make me a really awful person. That must make me a murderer. You know, like it just spirals out of control. The worry of harming people is a big one. There's another, you know, there are all sorts of different obsessions, but also worries around, so there's one sort of subsection, I guess, called relationship OCD. So it's being really worried that, you know, the person you're with, maybe they're not the right one for you. You start worrying about all their imperfections and all their faults, I guess, and then you start convincing yourself that you actually don't want to be with them anymore and you need to break up with them. And then there's obsessions around sexuality as well. You know, am I attracted to, you know, whoever it is that, you know, if you've got a husband or whatever, am I attracted to men? Am I going to leave him for a woman? All that kind of thing. And then, I mean, there's even like people who worry about like pedophilia, which is just such an awful, awful topic to ever have to talk about. And I just want to make it clear that no one who suffers these things is ever going to act on any of these thoughts. It's actually the opposite. So I think they call it ego dystonic thoughts or something. When you've got these intrusive thoughts, they're really counter to how you want to see yourself and how you want others to see yourself. And they really go against your values. And that's what makes them so distressing. But it means that for a lot of people, you just never seek help because you're so embarrassed to talk about these thoughts that you have, because you're worried that they're going to think that's what you want to do, or that's what you are going to hurt someone, or you are going to break up with your partner because you don't love them. So it's like a taboo on a taboo. So like it's already hard to have a mental illness, but then when you have these awful thoughts attached to it, I think it's even harder to seek help. And I think there's a really great book called The Man Who Couldn't Stop, and it's about this British guy who has had OCD, and he calls it like a silent epidemic because so many people don't actually get help for it. Are you comfortable sharing what your obsessions and compulsions have been over your lifetime? Because I know they have changed for you. Yeah, and they've changed. This is like I heard this for the first time with your psychologist, when your psychologist helped you to tell me what they were. Yeah. And that was sort of 5 years into our relationship. So, but if you'd be comfortable sharing, I think it'd be really helpful, because I think a lot of people would, I think other people who have experienced it would feel a lot better.
Yeah, definitely. So they've sort of evolved a lot from when I was little to now. So I remember as a really young kid, I was worried about my parents dying. I mean, that's, again, a very common worry of, you know, like a 6 or 7 year old. But if they went out for dinner and we had a babysitter, for example, I'd start to worry. I'd get this thought that they'd be in a car crash, and then somehow it would spiral into, well, they're going to die unless I do these certain kind of rituals. So it would be like certain knocking on wood or certain things that I'd have to say before I went to bed to make sure they wouldn't die. So it was all kind of turned on me and became my responsibility. So that was something I can remember really young.
And is that sort of 8 So what did you
Probably
how old?
younger, probably
Yeah,
6
okay.
or 7.
Okay, yeah.
And then as I got a bit older, I started like little things like, so we moved overseas. We moved to Geneva when I was about 7, and we were looking at apartments. And if for example, I mean, this sounds so ridiculous. There was like the curtains of one apartment that were like this yellow color, and I couldn't get out of my head that they looked like banana, like a banana color, like a really, like, this is so hard to explain. But every time I'd look at them, I'd think of like squashed banana.
Right.
Then,
I didn't know this.
and then I couldn't stop, and that was just really gross in my head. And then I couldn't stop associating that place with that
Right.
thought. And so then I remember telling Mum, well, we can't get this apartment because I won't be able to ever get that out of my head, which seems so weird.
Yeah.
And talk like saying it out loud. But that was really distressing to me. So I think we did get that place in the end. So that was a bit of an exposure, but just weird things like that. And then it sort of took a bit of a turn, and I started worrying. I started obsessing that I had AIDS when I was like 8. And they often say that OCD the sort of obsessions will reflect society's anxieties or fears of the time. So I don't know if you talked, if
you know more about this than I do.
yeah.
So
It's sort of evolved over the years. So I think they saw a spike of like syphilis related obsessions in the 20s, and that changed over time depending on what was sort of really talked about a lot and what campaigns are out there. And I know, in the 80s and 90s, there was so many people who were really worried about having HIV, who had OCD. And in the group session that I have with the other girls, I think all of them have had that obsession.
Really?
And so many of them have had called the AIDS or HIV hotline hundreds of times to try to seek reassurance.
Really?
Yeah.
And this is when it was obviously, I mean, you knew intellectually that you wouldn't have it.
Yeah, my dad was working for UNAIDS, right? So he was often talking about it, and we were watching things on TV about it. And I think absolutely it's so illogical, but it doesn't matter. It's not, OCD isn't logical. It's all about uncertainty. So you can't be comfortable with uncertainty. So even if I know there's a 0.000, 1% chance I've got something. I mean, again, with AIDS, it was like there was no chance. But then I will worry and worry and worry and worry. And that sort of
So what was it? So your obsession was that you had AIDS. What was your compulsion?
Yeah, so this is why like what they call pure O is a little bit different, I think, in some ways to other kinds. So it's a bit harder to see the compulsion, but I guess in some ways it was washing hands and that kind of thing, but just to make sure I wouldn't pick up anything. But most of the time my compulsion was, like I said before, trying to seek reassurance from people. So I'd probably, when it was at its worst, I would be going and talking to my mum probably like 20 times a day, I reckon, and just trying to get her reassurance and, walk her through these different scenarios and have her tell me, no, there's no chance. But the really cruel thing about OCD is that the compulsions actually make it worse. So the more you seek reassurance or the more you perform a compulsion, it's likely the worse it'll get.
Okay.
So that's what I was really worried about at that time. And then it evolved again when I was, I was a teenager and I was at high school. And, in high school it's all about who you like at school and who you're dating, and it sort of all became more about sexuality. So I remember being really worried that I had a boyfriend at the time, and I was worried that I'd become known for being like a slut for doing something that I didn't even want to do. Like it's so weird because you start just picturing these kind of different scenarios and then they become real in your head. And I'm like, well, if I do this, then I'll be known as like the school slut. And it's kind of hard to explain, but why are you laughing?
No, I'm not laughing. I wasn't laughing. You started laughing. That's a really hard. That is a. Yeah.
It's a bit hard. It's a bit hard to explain. These are really hard topics to talk about.
But this is, as you're saying this, to me, all of them, and we'll keep going because I know there's more, but all of them are a deep fear of disconnection. Is that right?
Is it disconnection? It's like a fear of losing what you value, I think, and maybe what you love as well. So, so a bit harder with that example, but it was that sort of went against my own values, I guess. Like I was a pretty innocent young thing, and I thought it just a very scary thought to be known that way. Yeah. And so that became a reality in my head. Yeah. And then I was scared to even kiss a boy because of that thought. So, so it's kind of like kind of a fear of disconnection, but I think it's more a fear of losing what you love, but also for so many people it's a fear of hurting other people in whatever way that is. And then, once I did start like dating, I was in a relationship in my sort of late teens, and I was really happy in that relationship and very much in love. And then I started worrying that I was gay, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm not attracted to him. Maybe I'm attracted to women. And it was only because that would then force me to leave that relationship. And that's that's the last thing I wanted. Yeah. So it's so cruel, really. So that became a bit of an obsession for a while. And again, these are really hard things to talk about because it's not like that's a bad thing to be. I had nothing against being gay at all, but it was just that's not who I was and it's not what I wanted. Yeah. But it's hard to go up to someone and say this is my worry because like what
especially
do you do?
At that age, like I don't. Yeah, it's still hard to know how to discuss that. So anyone at age 17, 18, 19, that's a really difficult conversation to have, especially when you say, oh, I know that I'm not, but I just have this worry that I am.
Yeah, because you're worried that people are just going to be like, well, maybe you probably are, and that's okay. But that's not the point. Yeah. It's just
this irrational worry that you have.
Yeah. Yeah. And so again, throughout this whole time, I was still able to talk to my parents about it, which I think a lot of people can't do. Like, I mean, I don't know how Mum kind of stood it. Like, it just would have been so hard.
Your
for
parents
her.
are unbelievable people, so
yeah. So it was again just constantly trying to seek reassurance from her, but that's really hard when it's on those topics as well. And I think I finally caved, and because they knew something was wrong. Like, I mean, I was probably spending, and I think this is actually average for OCD sufferers to spend about 6 hours a day on obsessions and 4 hours a day on compulsions.
Oh my God.
Right, so that's like a whole day. And this was probably at its worst when I was in year 12, and every chance I had, I was just shutting myself away so that I could think it through and like think my way out of it or talk my way out of it with my mum. So that was really hard.
So that was in year 12, that was the fear that you might be gay, and that's what you were...
Well, they were all different fears, but I know that was one, and that was one that was really hard to talk about, so it kind of took over, I guess, for a bit. And then it changed again, down the track. But
so what other obsessions have you had? And I just like going through them because I feel like different people relate to different ones.
Well, another one was, which is actually seems to be quite common in the OCD group I'm in, is a fear of cheating on your boyfriend.
Oh,
again, this is really goes against what your values are, and so like the girls in the group that I'm in are so so in love with their partners, and that's why it's so abhorrent to them to think that they could cheat on them. But it's all about losing trust in yourself, and thinking that you're an awful person and thinking that you're capable of doing all these things. And again, it's about uncertainty. So a lot of girls are worried that if they've maybe had one too many drinks, they'll black out and they would have forgotten that they've cheated on their boyfriend. So they look back the next day and they start going through every single scenario, and they start asking people about what they were doing when they were drunk if they can't remember, and convince themselves that they've actually cheated, and that they have to come clean.
Even though they definitely haven't.
Even though they definitely haven't. So a lot of them are really worried to have more than 2 drinks, say, for example.
Yeah.
They just don't, because they don't want to have to go through that in their head. So that was a bit of a worry for a while. And then, what else has it been? I mean, again, this is the relationship OCD. So when we were going to when you proposed, when was this? 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And we were planning our wedding, I started really worrying, that these are the bloody hard things to talk about, especially sitting
Covered with me. Yeah.
But it was like, is this the person for me? Do I want to get married? Maybe I don't. Maybe this isn't right. Maybe I need to leave Hugh and leave my family, and I won't have anyone. Like that fear of losing everything you love. And it's the opposite of what I wanted, but that's why it's so awful.
Gosh.
So, yeah. But luckily at that time I had found a really great psychologist, and she helped me through it all, and it didn't spiral actually. Like it got a lot better.
But how exhausting is it for you when, like, I didn't know you were, we spend so much time together. I had no idea you were feeling like that. How hard is it? How exhausting is it to hide that?
Yeah, it's exhausting. That's the right word for it, I think. It's so exhausting. So a lot of the time it would be like if I was having a shower, I'd be in the shower for like an hour or something.
Yep.
And just worry about it and just obsess about it and go through all the different scenarios in my mind. Or at night. It was often at its worst. I think it was often the last, whatever worry it was at the time, it was like the last thing I'd think about when I went to bed, and the first thing I'd think about in the morning. So you're so stuck in your head. And I think I just look back on times when it was really bad, and I think, God, I was never present ever with anyone, really.
Which again must be exhausting, because you have given, for the last 5 years, a very good impersonation of someone who's extremely present. Like I feel like you are very, most of the time. I mean, I know when you're not there. But a lot of the time I don't even notice that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you learn how to pretend, I guess. I don't know.
So just having all that, knowing all that, now you've said that you've found a really great psychologist. For the people listening who are thinking, I've battled with this for a long time. One of my really good mates, messaged me straight after he'd read the book and read your chapter and said, I really struggle with OCD. I need help. And luckily I was able to send him in the direction of your psychologist. Now, not everyone's going to be able to see your psychologist. What do you say to people who are of any age who struggle with OCD and would like some relief from it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it took me so long to find the right psychologist. So I think I saw my first psychologist when I was about 19, and it was something my parents had encouraged me to do for years, and I'd always said, no, that'll make me look crazy. I'm not crazy. I'm not seeing a psychologist. Luckily, things have changed since then, and it's not, it's much more accepted, I think, that people see psychologists. But the first experience I had was awful. She was not the right psychologist for me.
What happened?
And she made me, I walked in, I was feeling sick about this whole thing because of the thought, the things I'd have to divulge to her, right? And I had to feel comfortable. And the first thing she said to me was, She said, I'm going to have to lay down some ground rules here. She said, I just want to let you know I'm not this, I'm not that. And it was like, I'm not your friend, I'm not your mum, I'm not your, whatever, I'm your psychologist and it means this, this and this. Like it just automatically made me feel really uncomfortable, and I just wanted to run out of that room, and I think I only lasted a few weeks. And then it took me another few years to find another psychologist. She was better, but she didn't really know. I don't think she knew much about OCD. She sort of mentioned it, but it was more about anxiety and cognitive behaviour therapy. So that's what I did for a while. And luckily I was actually seeing a psychiatrist at the same time, so I went on medication and that helped a huge amount. But the psychologist just wasn't right. So again, I was kind of put off, and I just waited probably another 5 years before I saw another psychologist. Anyway, it went on like this until I think Benji was like 1.5 or something, and these obsessions were still happening, and I just thought to myself, I can't keep going like this. Like I can't have him see me, as he's growing up, see me so worried about things and so stressed about things. He wouldn't know what's going on, but I just needed to make some sort of change really for him. And so I talked to my dad about it, and he said, okay, we're going to make a plan. Even if it takes you 12 months, we're going to find the right psychologist for you, and they're going to specialise in OCD. So even if that means you've got to be an inpatient somewhere or you've got to be an outpatient, whatever, like we're going to make sure this is, we sort this out once and for all. And through connections of, I think I asked my brother, who's got a friend who's a psychologist, whose wife knew someone. Anyway, I finally came across someone who specialises in OCD and who's in Melbourne. And there are a few, I'm sure there are quite a lot of them out there, but I couldn't, it was so hard for me to find. And I've got people who work in that, in that industry, and a dad who's a doctor, and even like that was so hard. So I can't imagine for some people how difficult it is. Anyway, I finally found the right person, and it just made all the difference, because she is an expert really in OCD, and she does what's called exposure and response therapy. So it's very different to CBT, and it's very uncomfortable, but it's all about sitting with uncertainty and learning to do that, and learning to sit with your fears.
Yeah.
I guess. So that changed everything.
So the big one for me there is to do research.
Yeah.
Like you need to research, or you need to do research for someone who is an expert in OCD, and then be patient.
Yeah, I think
as far
so.
as like, it's a bit like dating. I think I've said it before on this podcast, but it's a bit like dating. You just got to find the right psychologist.
And not settle. If it doesn't feel right, don't feel like you've got to settle. I mean, this is so easy to say, because like I think I was in a position where I could wait. Like I wasn't desperate to see someone, but I know it's really difficult for people who just are, really in crisis, crisis point, and need to see someone. But if you can, I think it's doing your research and trying to find someone who specialises in it, and sort of looking into different therapies like exposure response, or like some of them do what is it? ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy.
Yep.
So there are different kind of ones, but for me, the exposure therapy has been probably the best thing I've ever done, and it's pretty full on. So I think
you give us an example of what you do?
Well, so making a loop tape of what you're most scared about. So it could be, if you are worried about cheating on your partner, it's talking into your phone and saying things like, I went out last night. I had 5 drinks. I did actually I did see someone who was quite attractive. Maybe I did cheat on my boyfriend. Maybe, who knows, maybe I had sex with them. Maybe I'm going to have to leave my partner and be alone for the rest of my life. And it sounds awful, and it is awful. It's really fucking awful. But it's just starting to be okay with that discomfort. And the more you do it, the sort of easier it becomes. So the idea would be to listen to that loop tape for half an hour every day, for example. And then the first time you listen to it, it's like you're your heart rate will really speed up. You might even start hyperventilating if it's something you're really worried about. And then the more you listen to it, the sort of, it sounds a bit weird, but the more boring it becomes.
Yeah.
And you sort of start to just sort of think, well, maybe I did do this. Maybe this did happen. I can never be 100% certain about anything, and no one can. And just being okay with that. Because most people would say to themselves, well, I don't want to cheat on my partner. It's not something I would set out to do. The likelihood is I didn't do anything, even if I blacked out last night. And then that's enough for them. But I think if you've got OCD, you've got that glimmer of like, there's a very slight chance, so I'm going to worry about that.
How are you now? Like, now we've got, by the way, unbelievable effort for you to do this today after the night we had last night. Sorry, the night you had last night with Elsie.
I think that's why I can't talk today.
No, you're doing so incredibly well. I'm sitting here feeling so unbelievably proud of you. But how are you now? You're getting minimal sleep. Elsie's really struggling to sleep. She's 8 weeks old. We are isolated in our house with Benji, who is losing his marbles and going through a stage where he throws everything and hits everything and everyone. Does that make it worse for you? Does lack of sleep, does difficult times make it worse?
Yeah, it definitely does. Amazingly, I've been okay, since Elsie was born. And weirdly, throughout my 2 pregnancies, that's the happiest I've ever been. I don't know if something happens with oxytocin or different hormones that are going through your body, but it's like OCD just fades away when I'm pregnant. So that's pretty nice. Does
that mean we'd have a 3rd kid?
We might have 7 kids. No, God, no. But I think the real change for me has been seeing my psychologist for, say, a year and a half before this time, and that really set me up for being able to deal with it even in stressful times. So I haven't spiraled when usually I would. So I actually feel okay. I think there are times when I felt really, really tired and really drained, and there's sort of certain thoughts have crept back in, but they haven't really taken hold like they usually would. And that's not to say it's gone away. I think that's how it is at the moment, which I'm really grateful for. And I'm still seeing the psychologist, and I've been on medication for 11 years, and I think that makes a huge difference, because it actually gets me to the point where I can try different techniques and feel calm enough to do that. So I feel pretty good right now, but it's all because of this psychologist I've seen, really, and because I've got a partner who's so supportive, who I can talk about it with, even really hard things to talk about I can still talk to you about. But yeah, I do sometimes worry that it'll spike again, and maybe I guess the likelihood is that it will, but because I often used to think when I was little, or when I was a bit younger, this will go away. When I'm older, this will just go away. And I've kind of come to the realization that it will never really go away. I don't think it'll get better, and then sometimes it might get worse, but I just need to learn to manage it. So it's a pretty awful realization, I think. But then once you accept it, I think it makes it a bit easier, and you find ways to deal with it.
Just quickly, how would have you coped as a, let's say, 12, 13, 14-year-old if there's a coronavirus outbreak? What would have that done to your OCD?
Oh, I just feel really sad and really scared for a lot of people out there, and like you said, a lot of younger people and kids and teenagers who might be prone to OCD and then have got all this stuff going around constantly, the news, and with everyone really on edge right now. And I think most people, I've got really dry hands from washing my hands, and it's not something that I'm obsessing about, but it's just something I'm doing.
That's what we have to, yeah.
Because you have to. And so for people who are then prone to these obsessions, it just makes me feel sick, really, with worry. So I think I wouldn't have coped well. I think I would start to really worry that I've infected other people. And I was we were talking about it on our group WhatsApp with the girls in the OCD group, and I was, we check in with each other, and some of them were really struggling and saying, one of them was at a park, and a kid threw this is like a week or two ago, a kid had thrown a Frisbee and she picked it up, without thinking and threw it back as you would. And then she just started spiraling with these thoughts of, well, what if I passed on these germs to this kid? What if the kid now has coronavirus?
So that's a really good example. So it wasn't about her getting it. It was about the fact she might have hurt someone else.
Exactly, yeah. And then she also said that this isn't funny, but it just shows how kind of absurd it can get. She said that she had sanitized a pole that she was standing near, like just a signpost, whatever. And she didn't even know if she touched it or not.
So hang on, what do you mean? She saw a pole and she went and...
Which I think she must have been standing near there, and then she thought, I might have touched that, so I need to put hand sanitizer on it in case someone else touches it, because I don't want to infect them, because someone else could come and touch this. Like, it's so, so tiring. And it just exacerbates it with the whole world being, so worried about this, rightly so, right now. I just fear a real spike in OCD around this topic. But I think if there are any parents out there who are worried that maybe their kids are maybe going through this, I'd really suggest trying to talk about it with them, and because, like we said, it is something that's often shut away, and if they can start talking at least to you about them and holding a really open, non-judgmental space for them, and then encouraging them when they're ready to see someone, to speak to someone, to a professional, it's just will make all the difference really in the long run.
Yeah, that's really nice advice. Thank you for that. Thank you for doing this interview. I know it's a extremely hard thing to do, and even in your chapter of the book, which you pretty much wrote, really, I know that was really hard. And you've had people reach out to you, and I feel like listening to you talk about that, it feels like a really worthwhile experience for you, sharing your journey, because it's helped other people. But I feel like this will reach a lot more people, and especially how vulnerable you've been, because this is up a few levels from the book where you gave generic examples, but you've actually given your own life examples today, and you've said how hard it is to talk to people about it, but to actually do it in this format. I'm so proud of you, and I couldn't say this in our vows, obviously at our wedding, because it's not my business to say this, but I can now that you've shared this. I think one of the things I love about you most, and I'm most proud about you, is how hard you fight against this, and I see how much work you put in, and I see the effort you put in to make sure this doesn't get on top of you, and I am in awe of that. And I hope when our kids, if they struggle with stuff like this, I hope they fight as hard as you do.
Thank you. That's made me tear up. Thank you.
Let's get out of the cupboard. Penny, thank you so much for doing this. It's I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. I just want to know what intro Ryan's going to do for this episode.
We're sitting around a corner in a chair. We could probably ask him.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that was pretty extraordinary.
Yeah,
to hear that story.
Yeah, it's pretty full on.
I mean, I'd already obviously heard a version of it that you guys recorded a while ago now, but it was a very different experience. Hiding around the corner in your bedroom as you two discuss some of the most personal things, because Josh, you were out walking with Elsie. And while I was literally, it was just like me hiding in the corner of your bedroom that you guys couldn't see me while you talked about the most personal things in your life, in your cupboard. It was quite a strange experience.
I did look around when Penny was really like going for it. I did sort of look over my shoulder. Just all I could see was your feet poking around the corner.
Yeah. It was, really, I mean, very strange. Like I've sort of, because I had the headphones on listening, I kind of forgot where I was every now and again, and because I was just so enthralled in what was happening, it kind of sounded like I was listening to the podcast. And then I remembered, oh, she's right there, like around the corner. It was a strange experience. And it was, I mean, incredible insight from Penny, and so lovely of her to open up like that. What I found particularly interesting was hearing kind of the spectrum, which sort of started on the lower end of the spectrum, which was the fact that she was distressed about the curtains triggering like squashed banana for her.
Yeah.
Then at the other end of the spectrum being what she talked about, and the more difficult times, like whether it be AIDS or worrying that she's going to cheat on you, or even just what she talked about with, I don't know, like what she was thinking before you guys got married and having doubts about that. Because I think having doubts about a relationship in a relationship is probably a pretty universal thing. But I imagine for someone who's suffering from OCD anxiety, that is just so heightened and seems so real and distressing, as opposed to, you know, when I've ever had those thoughts within a relationship, it's probably easier for me to kind of just bounce
move
back,
past it.
move past it.
Yeah. Well, it can be devastating, those thoughts. I mean, even Penny's example of, I mean, that time after we got engaged and the year leading up to the wedding, it was a really happy time in our life. And I know it was because I was there when we were having great times, but it really makes me very sad to think that she was sabotaging herself with thoughts that, no, he might not be the one. And then the thought that she might cheat on me. Out of every human being I've ever met in my entire life, she is the last person who would ever cheat on anyone. And yet she what's the word? She punishes herself for this.
Well, it kind of it did make me also then think about the experience for you being in a relationship with someone who has these thoughts and struggles like in the way that Penny just talked about. That's, I imagine, pretty hard on a partner. I mean, I'm in a relationship with someone, with Jam, and she struggles with depression and anxiety quite regularly, and it can, you know, it's up and down. It can be quite dark, and that's challenging. It's a challenging thing. And I've heard a few people over the years talk about living with someone with a mental illness of some sort. And even like, I loved, you know, that video that Will and Woody did.
Yep.
We should link to that because that is an extraordinary video. Will and Woody are radio hosts, and they did this incredible video, which I won't massacre by trying to explain it, but it's sort of on that topic of living with or working with someone who
it's
struggles.
Brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
But for you, what was your experience like especially during like that time, or did you sort of develop or figure out ways to support her or to?
Well, I guess it's a really great question because the last thing I want to do is take. Well done.
Thanks a lot.
The last thing I want to do is to take it off Penny and then just say, well, let's just talk about me. So, but I also, what we usually do is we in this part here, if you've never listened to this podcast before, we usually dissect the interview and then I talk about helpful strategies. I think Penny has given the helpful strategies.
Yep.
And I don't want to I don't want to downplay what she said at all by then giving my own strategies. So I think that's actually good for us to do now, is to talk about how you can support, what it's like living with someone with a mental illness. And and I know that you're in a similar situation. So really, you know, this is just my experience and what has helped me and my thoughts on it. Also from the fact that I look back and realise I have actually been in relationships before with people who've struggled with mental illness. And whilst I'd like to think I was compassionate and I was caring, I didn't really do much, I suppose. I didn't know what to do. So I just sort of was nice to them, as nice as I could possibly be. But with Penny now, as being a bit older and now the work I do, there are a few things that I've made sure that I do that really helped me. I mean, they may resonate with you, I don't know, or anyone listening, but hopefully these help people who are, because it can be really, really exhausting and upsetting and really painful, really hurtful at times. So anyway, these are things that I've sort of found have been really helpful for me. So, and I've actually got them written down. So the first one is to educate yourself. So when they eventually have the courage to tell you that this is what I'm going through. I remember a partner once telling me, I have this anxiety thing. And I went, oh, right. Gosh, that sounds really bad. And I listened to them, but I didn't go and learn more about it. And I wish in hindsight I did. Mm-hmm. With Penny, when she said I have anxiety, I already knew a bit about it then, but then the OCD stuff, I spent so long reading about it.
Yeah.
And I just tried to understand as much as I possibly could. It was a hard one to find information on, though, as Penny talked about just then. So educate yourself is the first thing.
Well, probably the main reason why I first convinced myself that it was important that I go and see a psychologist, one of the main reasons was to try and figure out how I can best be there for or support Jam.
Yep.
Because, I'd done a bunch of reading, but it was because it's such an ever-changing situation. It's always evolving, always changing. Sometimes it's great, and then the next day it's really challenging. So I've found that a good way to educate myself is having like a professional to talk to about it and to essentially bounce ideas off with them and to say to them, this is what happened last week. If that happens again, can we talk about some strategies of how I can deal with it?
Okay, awesome. So that's there's no better way to educate yourself.
It's so helpful. It's helpful for me personally as well, but it's for that situation, it's great.
Yeah. So the next one I had was, I suppose in educating, I think a big thing is to learn the symptoms. So that's really important. Because that helps you with so many other parts. But the second one I've found is to embrace them when she's really trying to really embrace her. Might be physically in a hug, but also by embrace I mean to validate and to sympathise. So. Mm-hmm. When she tells me,
to accept?
Yeah, totally, yeah. So when she tells me something that she's thinking or something she's feeling or something that's happening to her or she's feeling particularly anxious, is just to say, I totally understand why you feel like that. That makes complete sense to me. And sometimes it might be a while back I was cleaning up and I put the knives, she wanted all the knives facing the same way, I put them all over the place.
In the dishwasher?
No, in the rack that they come in. Yeah, and I had them all facing different ways.
God, that is a nightmare.
Well, it's not that bad, but
it's pretty bad.
Well, I don't think it's that bad, but anyway. So Penny got a bit upset about that, and then I was just said, "You're kidding? Like it's gonna be fine. They're gonna sit there. We know where they are. Ooh. They're in. It's riling you up. I can tell.
I hate it.
Okay.
I hate it.
Anyway, so and then when I came back because I'd educated myself and understood the symptoms and what Penny's anxiety was like, I said, no, do you know what? I totally get it. I understand. Mm-hmm. I understand that, and I get why you feel like that. And I sort of switched them all around. I carried on a little bit, but in the end, I did validate the way. I was like, I totally get why you feel like that's fine. I don't want to make her feel stupid about it. You don't make them feel silly, even though in my head it was a bit silly, but yeah, validate the way they're feeling. When they reach out to you and tell them how they're feeling, validate them as much as possible.
Yep.
Never ever give advice. Never give them advice. I think you're better off just to sit there and be quiet than to give advice.
Never give advice.
Well, that's what I've found for me. It's been
I am failing at that. Oh, God.
Well, advice is in stuff like, it could be stuff like, here, I'll get you some water, or do you want a drink, or do you want to but not like psychological advice is probably what I should say.
Yeah, okay.
Don't give psychological advice.
That's really good.
Because I think it only comes across as, if you're not a psychologist, it comes across as patronising and it kind of downplays what they're experiencing. So just being there and letting them talk at you and talk at you and talk at you. The next one is don't give advice. Well, sorry, don't be their therapist. I think you can fall into the trap of saying it's my job to fix this person. It's my responsibility for them to feel happy again. When they're with me, I'm going to make them feel better again. It is not your job to be their therapist. It is not your job to ensure that they get better. That is a very dangerous dynamic to fall into.
Yeah. Oh God, I'm not doing well at that then.
But it's your natural instinct as a loving person who cares.
I just want to. If I think I know what to do, or what even just a bit of advice. It's so tempting, and I just fall into that trap all the time.
Well, yeah, and I think we all do. I certainly did. Like when I was first with Penny, I was thinking, oh, well, with what I do for work, I can help. I have people message me out of the blue all the time who say, I heard you do a talk and I'm so much better now. Your talks made me feel so much better. So I'm thinking, well, gosh, if we're together, imagine what I can do for Penny. And her OCD anxiety has not gone away. It's still there.
Wow.
And so it took me a while to realize that I'm not a therapist. I can't fix her. I'm here to be her partner. And you can't have a relationship where one person's leaning on the other person.
Do you want me to talk to her? Maybe I can fix her. If you can't, I'll give it a go.
She's in the kitchen if you want to go.
I'll have a talk to her.
So yeah, don't fall into the trap of trying to be their therapist who is you're trying to fix them.
Yeah.
It's a partnership or relationship. It's not a patient therapist type relationship. Yeah. So don't give advice. Don't be their therapist.
Well, I mean, it's funny you say that actually. So my psychologist the other day said to me, like, one of the worst words, and you probably know this, but one of the worst words someone can hear if they have anxiety is should.
Yeah, right.
Because should is an expectation for other people, not for yourself.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah,
that's a really helpful one. And the last one I've found really powerful for me is laughter. So I've found that Penny and I have the exact same sense of humour. The same things make us laugh. And whether it's, if I know she's struggling, not saying, hey, here's something funny that might make you feel a bit better. It's something I've seen on Instagram that day that I know will really tickle her. If it's a story that I know, I've just found laughter is so unbelievably powerful for her.
Yeah. And
so I'm not saying that's the case for everyone, but a perfect example. The video that you did as part of your new the Ryan.com with 11 Whys.
Yeah.
You're releasing a video every single month on the 11th of every month. For no other reason than just to put content out there.
Yep, to make stuff.
Yeah, to make stuff. She'd had a really, really tough day when I got home from work just recently when you released the second video. And I could tell that she was struggling with stuff. And there's a couple of things she does when she's particularly anxious. And she said in the interview there, she feels like she's not very present. When she's not present, I know it's because of her anxiety's taken over. Mm-hmm. And I said, have you seen Ryan's video, the one he's just released? She said, I haven't. And I was so relieved. And I played it for her and we both pissed ourselves laughing. And it was a totally different,
wow.
It was just a totally different dynamic. And all of a sudden she's very present again. So for me, laughter has been one for Penny that's been huge. And to understand that we're only a good laugh away from moving past whatever she's going through. And so the other thing I should have said, which has been really big for me, is to not take things personally. Mm-hmm. Which can be really hard sometimes.
Yeah.
So if I get home, I've had a great day, some really exciting news, and I tell her, and she hasn't taken it, she hasn't listened, she hasn't responded the way I want, the first thing I do normally is take it personally and go, do you not care about the fact that this has happened to me? How can you not be happy for this? It's got nothing to do with me. She's probably ruminating over an obsessive thought, and she doesn't want to be. She can't help it. And yet here's me going, I'll just compound the issue by going, did you just listen to what I just said? Or do you not care that this just happened? This is great news. So not taking things personally, it's taken me a while.
Which is empathy?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's putting yourself in her shoes. I mean, it took me, like I mentioned in the interview then, the start of our relationship, the first few months, I'm like head over heels, this is the most exciting thing ever. This is the one. And quite often I wouldn't get that back from it. I took it really personally. And I look back now and realise that she was probably going through hell going, I'm falling in love with this person. No, it can't be the one. He's not the one. And this is obsessive thought she's dealing with. Yet here's me going, how can she not be feeling the way I'm feeling right now?
Look at me. She has scored.
I realised that's where I was heading then.
I mean, what sort of mad woman is this? Look what she's got.
Does she not realise?
She has landed on a jackpot. Got my own business. Very attractive. I'm a runner. I tell good jokes. I mean, what is she complaining about?
Oh, dear. So that'd be my advice for people who are, and everyone will have worked out what works for them. But for me, the education part is really important.
Yeah,
validate the way they make them feel like Don't let them feel shame at any point. So validate what they're going through. Don't take things personally. It's really big. Laughter has been huge for us as well.
Yeah. And never give advice.
Yeah. Don't give advice. Yeah, like you know more than they do about the issue.
So it's what's the first one again?
Education.
Educate.
So educate yourself.
Educate, validate.
Yep.
Don't give advice.
Yep.
And laughter.
Yep. And then don't take it personally.
So the acronym being EVDLD. EVDLD. So just remember to practice EVDLD.
I'm sure everyone will remember that.
EVDLD. EVDLD.
That is the takeaway from today's podcast. EVDLD.
Just remember, guys, GEM, gratitude, empathy, mindfulness, and EVDLD. Work in progress.
Well, thanks for joining me in the cupboard again.
It's great to be in here again, Hugh, and that. I mean, I really think that from Penny, and there's me a lot of people who listen to that, and will. It could quite possibly change people's lives hearing that if they've never heard anything like that before. There's even the people who read your book and read that chapter who reached out to you. I just know there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be helped massively by that.
Well, considering this is quite a sad thing to say, but I think we're headed towards an OCD epidemic. I mean, so many things are going to happen after the dust settles on this.
Yeah.
But I do think that this is going to be a really a huge issue. So I hope this episode helps people somewhat in a very, very difficult time.
Thank you very much, Hugh.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, thanks for coming in. And to Penny again, who might be listening to this now, thank you so much. You just are so proud of you. It's incredible. And thanks, Josh, for babysitting while we did that.
Thanks, Josh.
Wouldn't have happened. Would not have happened without you marching around the streets of Alphington with a baby strapped to your chest. See you soon.
Bye.
Hugh, it's Ryan here. How you going? That was great. Really, really good to chat, and the story from that all that stuff from Penny was amazing. So please pass on my thanks to her. So brave of her and all that. So really, we're really lucky to have that on the show. But the reason for my call, a bit of a weird one. I just actually noticed that after we finished recording, I was sort of saying goodbye, and you were saying goodbye, and we're like, yeah, cool, see you soon. You actually dipped, you dipped a bit close to me. You got within about 1.4 meters of me, which just gave me a bit of a fright. So, all good, obviously, but yeah, just please stick to that 1.5 meters if that's cool. I know I'm being a bit finicky, but it was about 1.4. I think you got to me. So just a bit shook. Great, but otherwise great fun. Good to see you. Okay, Hugh. Remember, just 1.5 would be great. Thanks, mate. Bye. It's Ryan Shelton, by the way.
To call back, press 2 to replace it.
If this episode has triggered anything for you around mental health, we strongly recommend Lifeline on 131114. The Imperfects is brought to you by the Resilience Project. Produced by Ryan Shelton, Hugh and Josh Van Kylenberg. A very, very special thank you also to No Mono for generously allowing us to use Keep On as the theme song for this podcast.